You are told that following your passion and doing what you love will naturally lead to financial success and personal fulfillment. What if I told you that the passion economy is designed to exploit your dreams while keeping you financially dependent? This sounds inspiring because we see successful artists, creators, and entrepreneurs who turn their passions into profitable careers. But there's something that doesn't quite add up when the most passionate people often struggle financially, while passionless corporate workers accumulate wealth.
Most career advice emphasizes finding your purpose and monetizing your talents through creative or meaningful work. Why do people who follow their passions often end up working longer hours for less money than those in traditional jobs? Following your dreams appears valuable because passionate work feels meaningful and personally satisfying compared to corporate employment. But what if the entire do what you love framework is actually designed to suppress wages in creative and meaningful industries? Think about the last time someone suggested you should pursue your passion instead of focusing on financial security. Did they mention how passion-based careers typically pay, or just how fulfilling they would be? The passion economy trap operates by convincing talented people to accept low compensation because they should feel grateful for doing meaningful work. This explains why industries built around passion and creativity consistently offer below-market wages while extracting enormous value from passionate workers. If you want to understand why following your dreams often leads to financial nightmares, while corporate drudgery leads to financial stability, subscribe to Prof. Zhang Explained and share this video with someone who left a stable job to pursue their passion. They need to see why their financial struggles aren't personal failures, but systemic exploitation. The system creates fundamentally different economic relationships between passionate and transactional work approaches. When we say pursue your passion, we mean totally different financial arrangements based on whether you prioritize personal fulfillment or economic security. For people pursuing passionate careers, financial success means accepting below-market compensation because the work provides intrinsic satisfaction, competing with others who also love the field, and hoping that dedication will eventually lead to breakthrough opportunities. For people in transactional careers, financial success means negotiating market rate compensation regardless of personal interest in the work, avoiding oversaturated fields where passion creates excessive competition, and focusing on industries that generate profit rather than meaning. Think about the difference between choosing a career because you love the work versus choosing a career because it pays well and offers advancement opportunities. This explains something remarkable about how different industries compensate workers based on passion levels rather than value creation or skill requirements. The difference isn't about work quality or social contribution. It creates systematically different financial outcomes, where passionate work gets undervalued, while boring work commands premium compensation. But here's where it gets interesting. The passion economy doesn't just underpay passionate workers. It actually creates oversupply in meaningful industries that drives wages down further. When everyone wants to work in creative, helpful, or meaningful fields, employers can offer low wages because someone passionate will always accept the position. This creates what economists call passion penalty, where workers essentially pay for the privilege of doing meaningful work through reduced compensation. Meanwhile, industries that people find boring or unpleasant must offer higher wages to attract workers, creating inverse relationship between job satisfaction and financial compensation. Consider how this affects career decisions. When meaningful work becomes a luxury that only people with financial support can afford to pursue. The passion economy becomes even more sophisticated when we examine how it handles the relationship between talent and compensation in creative industries. Passionate workers often possess exceptional skills and create enormous value for companies, but their love for the work makes them accept compensation that doesn't reflect their contribution. This passion exploitation allows companies in creative industries to capture most of the value generated by talented workers, while paying them a fraction of what equally skilled workers earn in corporate environments. The exploitation works because passionate workers measure success through creative fulfillment rather than financial metrics, making them easy targets for below-market compensation. Meanwhile, workers who view their jobs transactionally demand fair compensation regardless of whether they enjoy the work, making them more expensive but better protected financially. Do you find yourself accepting lower pay because you love your work, or do you negotiate based on the value you create, regardless of personal interest? The passion economy also exploits what behavioral economists call intrinsic motivation crowding, where external rewards like money supposedly diminish internal satisfaction from meaningful work. This psychological framework convinces passionate workers that caring about money will reduce their enjoyment and creativity, making them reluctant to negotiate for fair compensation. The crowding effect keeps talented people focused on fulfillment rather than financial security, ensuring they remain economically vulnerable despite creating significant value. This vulnerability prevents passionate workers from building wealth or achieving financial independence, keeping them dependent on continued employment rather than developing asset ownership. Meanwhile, transactional workers understand that money provides freedom to pursue personal interests outside work, making financial security a pathway to rather than obstacle to fulfillment. The passion economy also creates what psychologists call creative labor devaluation, where work that feels enjoyable gets treated as less valuable than work that feels difficult. A society develops beliefs that creative, artistic, or meaningful work isn't real work because people enjoy doing it, justifying lower compensation for industries that depend on passion. This devaluation becomes self-reinforcing as passionate workers internalize beliefs about their work being inherently less valuable than corporate or technical roles. The internalized devaluation prevents passionate workers from demanding fair compensation because they accept that their chosen field naturally pays less than other industries. But there's something even more sophisticated happening here. The passion economy doesn't just exploit individual workers. It actually creates economic structures that systematically extract value from entire creative and meaningful industries. Companies in passion-driven industries benefit from workers who will accept equity, deferred payment, exposure, or other non-monetary compensation because they believe in the mission or love the work. This alternative compensation allows companies to operate with much lower labor costs while capturing full value from passionate worker output through traditional profit mechanisms. The system creates what economists call passion subsidy, where workers essentially donate their labor to companies that profit from their dedication without reciprocal investment in worker financial security. Meanwhile, companies in transactional industries must provide competitive cash compensation, benefits, and advancement opportunities to attract and retain workers who evaluate opportunities based on financial merit. The passion economy also handles skill development and career advancement in ways that benefit companies more than passionate workers through exploitation of development desires. Passionate workers often accept unpaid internships, low-wage apprenticeships, and minimal benefit positions because they want to gain experience and build skills in their chosen field. This willingness to work for learning opportunities allows companies to access skilled labor at below market rates while providing minimal investment in worker development or advancement. The experience-focused compensation creates what labor economists call skill acquisition trap, where workers provide value while developing capabilities but never receive compensation that reflects their increasing contribution. Meanwhile, transactional workers typically demand paid training, clear advancement pathways, and compensation increases that correspond to skill development and increased value creation. Consider how different career trajectories become when you prioritize learning opportunities versus financial advancement in your professional decision-making process. The passion economy also creates what economists call exposure currency delusion, where workers accept visibility, networking opportunities, or portfolio development instead of monetary compensation. Passionate workers often believe that exposure will lead to future opportunities that justify current financial sacrifice, but exposure rarely converts to sustainable income. This exposure focus keeps workers producing valuable content or services for minimal compensation, while hoping that visibility will eventually translate to financial security. The delusion works because occasional breakthrough success stories make exposure seem like viable compensation strategy, even though statistical outcomes rarely support this approach. But the system also exploits what psychologists call purpose washing, where companies claim social missions or creative goals to justify below-market compensation for meaningful work. Organizations present themselves as mission-driven rather than profit-focused, convincing workers that compensation should reflect purpose rather than market value. This purpose framing allows companies to extract maximum value from passionate workers while avoiding competitive compensation standards that apply in purely transactional industries. The washing effect creates artificial distinction between purpose-driven and profit-driven work, when most successful companies pursue both objectives simultaneously at worker expense. Meanwhile, genuinely transactional companies can offer better financial security precisely because they don't disguise profit motives with purpose rhetoric that justifies worker exploitation. The passion economy also addresses what economists call market saturation effects, where too many people pursuing similar passionate careers creates competitive disadvantage for everyone in those fields. When creative and meaningful industries attract disproportionate numbers of talented workers, competition drives wages down and makes career success increasingly difficult, regardless of individual skill levels. This saturation creates what game theorists call collective action problem, where individual decisions to follow passion create systemic outcomes that harm all participants. The oversupply problem becomes self-perpetuating as passionate workers continue entering saturated fields because they measure success through fulfillment rather than financial outcomes. Meanwhile, less attractive industries with fewer passionate workers must offer competitive compensation and advancement opportunities to attract necessary talent. But perhaps the most insidious aspect of the passion economy is how it handles the relationship between personal identity and work in ways that make financial advocacy feel like betrayal of authentic self. Passionate workers often develop professional identities closely tied to their creative or meaningful work, making it psychologically difficult to demand fair compensation. When work becomes central to identity, advocating for better pay feels like commodifying something sacred, rather than protecting economic security necessary for continued creative work. This identity fusion prevents passionate workers from separating personal fulfillment from financial negotiation, ensuring they remain vulnerable to economic exploitation. Meanwhile, workers who maintain separation between personal identity and professional work can negotiate aggressively for compensation without feeling like they're compromising their authentic selves. The passion economy also exploits what behavioral economists call hedonic adaptation, where people adjust satisfaction levels to current circumstances rather than maintaining objective standards. Passionate workers often become satisfied with inadequate compensation because they compare their situation to unemployment or less meaningful work rather than to market standards. This adaptation prevents workers from recognizing that their financial struggles result from systemic exploitation rather than personal choices or market conditions. Dissatisfaction with inadequate compensation also prevents collective organizing that might improve wages across creative and meaningful industries. But the system also creates what sociologists call passion privilege, where only people with financial support can afford to pursue meaningful but low-paying careers. This privilege system ensures that creative and meaningful industries become dominated by workers who can afford to accept below-market compensation because they have family wealth, partner support, or alternative income sources. The privilege requirement excludes workers who need living wages from meaningful industries, reducing diversity and concentrating opportunities among those who can afford financial sacrifice. Meanwhile, working-class people get channeled into transactional careers regardless of their passions because they cannot afford the financial risks associated with meaningful work. The passion economy works because it converts genuine human desires for meaningful work into mechanisms that suppress wages while maintaining productivity through intrinsic rather than financial motivation. The system provides psychological satisfaction through purposeful work while ensuring that passionate workers remain economically dependent rather than building wealth or achieving financial independence. Workers feel fulfilled and important because their work has meaning while remaining vulnerable to economic insecurity that prevents long-term planning or asset building. Meanwhile, the actual financial benefits flow to companies and investors who profit from passionate worker dedication without reciprocal investment in worker financial security. The passion economy perpetuates itself because workers who succeed financially often had advantages that allowed them to survive the initial low compensation period rather than demonstrating that passion-based careers reliably generate wealth. They become examples that prove the system works while obscuring the systematic advantages that enable their success and the countless passionate workers who never achieve financial stability. And perhaps most remarkably, the passion economy has convinced people that questioning the relationship between meaningful work and fair compensation is somehow mercenary or inauthentic. When examining career satisfaction patterns reveals that financial security often enables greater creative freedom than accepting economic vulnerability for meaningful work. The passion economy represents one of the most effective mechanisms for extracting maximum value from talented and motivated workers, while preventing them from achieving the financial independence that would provide genuine creative freedom. The passion economy also creates what economists call creative displacement, where passionate workers accept non-monetary compensation that would be unacceptable in transactional industries. This displacement includes accepting equity in startups that rarely succeed, deferred payment that may never materialize, barter arrangements that don't pay bills, and profit sharing that depends on company success rather than individual contribution. The alternative compensation keeps passionate workers engaged without providing financial security, while companies benefit from full-value work output at minimal monetary cost. Meanwhile, transactional workers demand cash compensation, defined benefits, and predictable income streams because they evaluate opportunities based on financial merit rather than creative satisfaction. Consider how different financial planning becomes when your income depends on company success, market conditions, or client satisfaction rather than contractual salary obligations. The passion economy also exploits what psychologists call sunk cost emotional investment, where workers become increasingly committed to underpaid careers because abandoning them feels like wasting years of dedication. Passionate workers often continue accepting inadequate compensation because switching careers would mean admitting that their previous investment in meaningful work was financially irrational. This emotional investment prevents workers from making objective career decisions based on current market opportunities rather than historical dedication to particular fields. The sunk cost trap becomes particularly powerful when workers have developed specialized skills that don't transfer easily to higher-paying industries, making career transitions feel impossible. Meanwhile, transactional workers maintain flexibility to switch industries or roles based on financial opportunities without feeling like they're betraying personal values or wasting previous investment. The passion economy also handles what behavioral economists call social proof manipulation, where workers compare themselves to other passionate workers rather than market standards for similar skills. Passionate workers often justify low compensation by pointing to equally passionate peers who accept similar conditions rather than comparing their skills to what those same abilities would earn in corporate environments. This peer comparison keeps wages suppressed across entire industries because everyone accepts that meaningful work naturally pays less than transactional work. The social proof effect also operates through what marketing scholars call aspirational modeling, where successful, passionate workers promote financial sacrifice as necessary step toward eventual success. But these successful examples rarely reveal the family wealth, partner support, or alternative income sources that enabled them to survive periods of low compensation. The modeling effect convinces new passionate workers that financial struggle is normal and temporary rather than recognizing it as systematic exploitation of worker dedication. The passion economy also creates what economists call innovation extraction, where companies benefit from passionate worker creativity without providing ownership stakes or proportional compensation increases. Passionate workers often generate breakthrough ideas, creative solutions, and valuable intellectual property because they care deeply about their work and want to excel. This innovation gets captured by companies through employment agreements that transfer ownership of creative output, while providing minimal compensation increases for exceptional contribution. The extraction works because passionate workers focus on creative satisfaction rather than intellectual property rights, making them vulnerable to having their innovations commercialized without adequate compensation. Meanwhile, workers in transactional industries often negotiate ownership stakes, bonus structures, or royalty arrangements when their contributions generate significant company value. But there's something even more sophisticated happening here. The passion economy doesn't just exploit individual creativity. It actually creates cultural narratives that make financial advocacy seem incompatible with authentic artistic expression. The culture develops beliefs that truly passionate artists, writers, or creators shouldn't care about money because financial motivation supposedly corrupts creative purity. This cultural framework shames passionate workers who demand fair compensation, suggesting they lack genuine dedication to their craft or artistic integrity. The shame prevents passionate workers from organizing collectively to improve industry compensation standards, because advocating for better wages feels like admitting they're not authentically passionate. Meanwhile, the same cultural narratives don't apply to executives, investors, or company owners who profit from passionate worker output while maintaining focus on financial returns. The passion economy also handles what sociologists call lifestyle subsidization, where passionate workers accept reduced compensation by reducing their living standards rather than demanding adequate wages. Passionate workers often rationalize financial struggle by adopting minimalist lifestyles, sharing housing, avoiding major purchases, and generally reducing their cost of living to match inadequate income. This lifestyle adaptation allows companies to maintain low wage structures because workers accommodate inadequate compensation rather than demanding market rates. The subsidization also gets celebrated as authentic living or artistic sacrifice, rather than recognized as accommodation to systematic wage suppression. Meanwhile, workers in higher-paying industries can afford standard living costs without requiring lifestyle compromises that passionate workers accept as normal. The passion economy also exploits what economists call temporal manipulation, where immediate creative satisfaction distracts from long-term financial planning and wealth building. Passionate work provides daily fulfillment that makes financial insecurity feel less urgent compared to transactional work that offers monetary compensation but limited personal satisfaction. This temporal focus prevents passionate workers from recognizing that current financial sacrifice typically doesn't lead to future financial security without systematic wealth-building strategies. The immediate satisfaction also prevents workers from calculating opportunity costs of passionate careers compared to financial alternatives that would enable both security and creative freedom. Meanwhile, workers who prioritize financial security can use their higher compensation to fund creative projects, artistic pursuits, or meaningful activities without depending on those activities for income. The passion economy works because it converts authentic human desires for meaningful work into systematic wage suppression, while maintaining productivity through intrinsic motivation rather than financial incentives. The system provides psychological satisfaction through purposeful work while ensuring that passionate workers remain economically dependent rather than achieving financial security that would provide genuine creative freedom. Workers feel fulfilled and important because their work creates meaning while remaining vulnerable to economic insecurity that prevents wealth building or long-term. The system perpetuates itself because occasional breakthrough successes obscure systematic exploitation, while failed passionate careers get attributed to insufficient talent rather than inadequate compensation structures. And perhaps most insidiously, the passion economy has convinced both workers and society that meaningful work should inherently pay less than transactional work, rather than recognizing this as cultural conditioning that serves capital interests. When examining compensation patterns across industries reveals that wage suppression in meaningful work results from exploitation rather than natural market forces or inherent value differences. The passion economy represents one of the most sophisticated mechanisms for extracting maximum value from talented and dedicated workers while preventing them from achieving financial independence that would provide authentic creative freedom. Understanding the system doesn't mean abandoning meaningful work, but rather recognizing that fair compensation enables rather than corrupts creative expression, and that financial security provides the foundation for genuine artistic freedom. If you want more analysis of how career advice that promises fulfillment actually maintains systems that exploit passionate workers, subscribe to Prof. Zhang Explained, and share this with someone who left a stable job to follow their dreams. They need to understand why their financial struggles reflect systemic exploitation rather than personal failure.